Hello, love. So, this year, I've heard from a number of people, is the year of joy. Now, there are a lot of things that are not joyful about what's going on in our lives, either personally or professionally or across the world. But there's a way to look at those things and to recall things in your life that are joyful or things that maybe were joyful in your past. And so I'm just going to tell you a short story about something that brings me lots of joy or something that did when I was a child. We used to live I grew up in Denver, and we used to live in East Denver near City Park. And City Park has what is now called the Museum of Nature and Science. When I was growing up, it was called the Museum of Natural History. And we would go there, and I would go to where they would have the animals displayed, and they'd have these beautiful paintings behind that would give it a background. And in a lot of those different aspects, they had like little tiny elves and mushrooms and things like that that were hidden in the midst. And so there were all these little tiny things that were really meaningful and beautiful. The other part of that museum that I loved were the gemstones. And I've always loved gemstones. I come from a place in Colorado here where there was a lot of mining, a lot of gemstones. We have amethyst and no, we don't. We have uh, aquamarine, excuse me, aquamarine, and there's some garnets and there's lots of gold, lots of silver here in Colorado. And that's been mined for a long time. But we have other types of gemstones as well. But the point is that I always had an affinity for that from the time I was very small. And I would go to this one particular gemstone, which was a red a crystal, and that's actually the Colorado stone is called rhodolite. But anyway, I just sit there and I look at the things that I enjoyed as a child and how they have generated in me what it is that I've done as an adult. So in that park as well, of course, there's lots of grassy areas and trees. There's also the um, Denver Zoo, which is a beautiful zoo. They've done great things. They had and we would go there and see the animals and feed the ducks and there's the children's zoo within the zoo. And the zoo originally was a dairy back in, I believe, the late 1800s, and then the land was purchased later and made into a zoo. And it's a really beautiful zoo. Now, there's also the pavilion, which was a building, and it's still there. And on the edge of the pavilion is a lake. When I was a kid, we used to go ice skating there because that's when the lakes would freeze over. Doesn't do it so much now. But they also had I don't know what they're called. They're like a little boat, a little paddle boat, and you'd sit in it. Two of you'd sit on it, and you'd almost like ride a bicycle, and you'd paddle along, and you could go through around the lake and that. And we had paddle boats, and we did that, and that was really fun. But at the entrance, what I'm getting to is at the entrance to the main entrance to the park is this great big I believe it's carved out of granite, and it was a statue created by a gentleman who was an artist. And he was well known in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And this statue is from the early 1900s, and it was erected, and it's of a woman. And it was at the time when I was growing up, it was a fountain, and around it flowers were all every summer they put flowers around it. And when I was a kid, you could drive through the park, and you can't do that now. They won't let people drive through the park, but you could as a kid. So we would go to church every Sunday, and we drove oftentimes drive back past the park, and I would ask if we could go to see that statue because my dad called it the goddess of Wawa. Now, that's not what it's actually called, but I always wanted to go see the goddess of Wawa. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but I'm a lot about water. I have a lot of background in that, and my anyway, there's a lot more to that story. But the goddess of Wawa was important to me. Anyway, it brought me joy to see the goddess of Wawa. It brought me joy to go to the museum of what was then called the Natural Museum of Natural History. It brought me joy to see um, the the bones and everything of these incredible beings that used to live in this state, what's now a state. Then it was just their territory, all these dinosaurs, and they were all over the place there at that particular museum, and learning different things that they offered. It brought me joy to go to the zoo. It brought me joy to go and have a picnic with my mom in someplace in the park, and she'd have the big picnic basket. It was the standard picnic basket, and it had, the kind of plates that you would use as for a picnic, and she'd make fried chicken and potato salad, and it was all made. She made it all. It wasn't like you went to the store and bought all that stuff like you can today, or go to a fast food place and buy it. She made it all, and we go and have a picnic. So there are all these memories from there that bring me a lot of joy. So getting to who I am now, for years I made jewelry out of gemstones and sterling silver, and using other people's beautiful pieces. And then I would create jewelry like these earrings right here. These are these are a type of amethyst. They're called irradiated amethyst. They irradiate them and they turn them from a pale purple to this gorgeous color of green. And so I would make jewelry out of that, and I would sell it at a big box store. And I sold it in galleries and in uh, craft fairs and art fairs. And I did that for years. But the love of that, a lot of that came from going to that museum and seeing those gemstones. I also had an aunt that would take care of me. She was my great aunt. She was my grandfather's sister, and she would take care of me sometimes. And she had a great big suitcase that was filled with all the jewelry that she used to wear long ago. And there's a lot of stuff there that's totally cool. And I would call it bohemian type stuff, this beautiful bohemian glass and different things like that. And I still have some of those pieces. But the thing is that the animals were important to me. I'm an animal person, and I've told you stories about our how we feed the birds outside, and we have other animals that come to feed in our backyard. And I've had animals in the house since I was a kid. If they weren't started out with things like a little it's little tiny critters, and then fish in a fish bowl, and then dogs and cats. And I've always had dogs or cats from the time I was 6 years old. Still do. So I love animals, and they love me. And lucky for me, my husband is an animal person too, and they love him as well. It's just pretty cool how we do this together. It's one of the things that we share. So the goddess of Wawa, the Museum of Natural History, the gemstones, the beautiful paintings in the background. I've always been inspired by sunsets and sunrises, and I paint paintings like that in addition to painting paintings like this. But I do a lot of those types of paintings as well. And I was inspired by that ever since I was really, really small. So I'm just inviting you to take a gander at the memories of what it is you did when you were a child, and how does that generate something in you today? How did that create something in you that you are who you've always been? And when you're a kid, you don't have anything telling you how you can't do that until you get a little older, and then maybe have people tell you, oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. I mean, when I was growing up, I wanted to go to art school, and my mom said, oh, no, you have to be a secretary, because when she was growing up, that's what everybody did. They became secretary or something like that, and then that's what you would fall back on. So she said, that's what you have to do. Well, that's not my way of thinking. I later went to art school, got my degree, and do a lot of what I do with the art. not just from what I did in school, but something that's always been within me. And I continue to grow, continue to expand it, continue to make it into something more. And always the goddess of Wawa is there. And she brings me joy when I think about going there as a kid. And my folks would always comply. They'd say, I go, let's go see the goddess of Wawa. And they would take me and drive around. And I would look out the window, look at the goddess of Wawa. I was so inspired by this beautiful sculpture and the flowers and the water and the fountain and that beautiful park. So remember the things that brought you joy as a child. Remember that which brings you joy now and celebrate it. Celebrate those things within yourself. Celebrate the good because that will counteract the things that aren't so good. That will counteract the things that can be challenging in our lives. Bring yourself joy. Find things to bring you life again like they did when you were a kid. I sit here and I watch the birds outside the window and the squirrels and sometimes the raccoons and a beautiful little feral cat that comes to eat every single day. And I'm given joy from that. And I'm given joy from the two kitties that we have inside who are sisters who just are the sweetest cats. They never bite. They never fight. They never don't scratch at us or anything. They are just astounding. And I learn from them. So whatever brings you joy, go for it. Live it wide open. Share it with your loved ones, with those that you uh, have in your life. But also share it within who you are in the world because you're here to be your finest self. You're given this life to be who you are, your magnificence, the wonder of your very being, the glory of who you've come here to be. And you can not only help yourself, but help somebody else along the way. A lot of somebodies along the way. And shine. Shine on. So as Grandma always said, love you bunches. Bye for now.